Alright, we should not be playing with our chips anymore. Alright, so with investigation, we'll start investigation 2 today. Okay, it says extending addition to rational numbers. So it says, how can you predict whether the result of adding two numbers will be positive, negative, or 0? So that's kind of our focus for this this particular lesson. So in part 1, it says find the sums of each group. So if I take a +2 and add a +8 to it, what am I getting? Basically 2 plus 8. Yeah, 10. Now, what happens if I change that and just make it the negative? So if I take a -2 and add a -8 to it, what's that? -10, yeah, because they're opposites, right? Now what if I add an 8 and 12 together? 20. And -8 plus -12? -20. All right, let's go to group 2 now. Think about this, and if you need to, think about the chips. If you have 2 black chips, right, or you add 2, and you're adding -8 to it, so basically you're adding 8 red chips, what are you left with? What's going to be our result there? -6. Now, look at the second one. All I did was change the negative and positive around, right? What if I have a -2 and I add 8 to it? So I had 2 red chips and I add 8 black chips to it. 6, right. The opposites, right? Just like in group 1. All right, what about 8 adding -12 to it? And then -8 adding +12 to it? 4. Okay. So if we look here, it says, what do the examples in each group have in common? Well, in group 1, okay, that's my little number sign. So the numbers you're adding together, and when the word we use for adding 2 numbers together is we call them addends. ADDENDS. Okay, just so you're familiar with that word. When they have the same sign, the answer basically has the same sign, right? So basically up here, when I added a positive and a positive together, we ended up with a positive number, right? Over here, when we added a negative and a negative number, we got a negative answer. Same thing here, positive and a positive, the number was positive. Negative and negative, the answer is negative. Okay? Question? Well, I'm getting the, no. So in group 2, okay. So in group 2, we dealt with the 2 numbers have different signs, right? So the 2 numbers being added have different signs. Okay. The answer is the same sign as the number with the greatest absolute value. So what does that mean? Well, take a look at number 1. Okay, take a look at this one right here. How far is 2 from 0? How many units? How far is 2 from 0? 2. How far is -8 from 0? 8. Well, 8 is bigger than 2, right? So that's why this answer is negative. Okay, because it's further away from 0. Look at the next one. How far is -2 from 0? 2. How far is 8? 8. So again, this has the greater absolute value. Because remember, the absolute value of -2 is 2. the absolute value of 8 is 8. Because remember, that's the units away from 0. Remember we talked about that? All right, so because because the 8 is more units from 0, the answer is positive. Because the negative 8 is more units away from 0, the answer is negative. Look at this one. 8 is how many units away from 0? What about negative 12? So this is the bigger number, hence negative answer. See that? Okay. Since 12 is more units away than negative 8, our answer is positive because the bigger number is positive, or the more units away from 0.
At this time, the participants attending Lakeside Mall today for their donation
Okay.
for the cancer cause.
Number 3. So if we're kind of come up with a formula, we got a negative plus a negative is going to equal a negative, right? And when we added a positive to a positive, that answer was positive, right? That was pretty much what we did in group 1. Right? And again, in group 2, we were talking about the greatest absolute value, right? So, for example, if I took 2 plus 8, right? The absolute value of 2 is 2. The absolute value of negative 8 is 8. So again, the greater absolute value is the sign of the answer. In that first case, since the negative was more units away from 0 than the positive number, your answer becomes negative. Okay? And if you think about that on a number line, right? If 0 is here and 2 is here and negative 8 is way down here, right? And usually when you add two numbers together, a distance, right? Especially a negative, you're kind of finding somewhere in the middle. Well, look where it's tilted to, right? So if I go from 2 and I add negative 8, I'm going this way, right? All right, so it's just a greater. So we get 2 to here, and then 6 more gives me negative 6. Okay. So sometimes visuals can help too. The chips can help. I know a lot of you guys like to use the chips. So it's the greater absolute value. So always think about when you're adding a positive and a negative number, who's further away from 0? Okay. All right, so in part B, I'm going to pause and let you use. So I want you to try to use either a number line or chips. Explain how you could use a chip model, so you're going to use the chips here, to solve negative 3 plus a negative 5. So I want you to use the chips to figure it out, and then I want you to just kind of write me a little blurb there in words for number 1. We're only going to take a couple minutes to do this. All right. So, did everyone pretty much do this? You basically started with 3 black chips, or I'm sorry, 3 red chips, right? You added 5 red chips, right, to get 8 red chips. Is that pretty much what everybody did? So if you were to write that as a sentence, basically, negative 3 plus negative 5 equals negative 8, right? All right, so how can we show, how would you use a number line to solve 5 plus negative 8? Well, the number on our left is where we start, right? Right, so 5 is over here, right? In which direction do we got to go if we're adding negative 8, Lily? Left, right? So we got to go 8 units left, right? So then we got 4, and then we got 3, and then we got 2, right? So if I started here, right, and to get all the way to 0, we subtracted 5, right? So how much further do I got to go? 3, right? Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. So if I go another 3 to get to there, right, there's your negative 8 units. So our answer would be negative 3. All those visuals are good, right? All right, so in part C, I want you to use either the number line like we just did or the chips, and I want you to solve 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? We're going to solve 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to pause the video right now. All right, so we'll rotate using models. How's that? So what'd you get for number 1? 9, right? Because if I had, if you did it with a chip model, right, you'd have 12 black chips, right? And then 3 red, right? And there's basically 3 pairs that cancel out, right? The 3 black and the 3 red kind of cancel each other out, right? Leaving us with 9 black chips. All right, what about number 2? What'd you get for number 2? Negative 25 plus negative 4. Not negative 21. Negative 29. Because remember, here's our number line, right? So if here's 0, and way down here is negative 25. All right, so we go this way. If I'm adding a negative number, right, I'm going left, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So negative 29 is our answer, right? If we're adding a positive number, then we go to the right. What about number 3? What about number 3? Gavin, what'd you get for number 3? Good, negative 24. Because again, kind of the same idea, right? If I draw my number line over here, and we start at negative 18, way over there is 0. If I'm adding negative, I'm going left, right? So we got to go to 19, to 20. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, what about for 4? Negative 6 plus 16, Ashley. 10, right? And again, if you use a chip model, 6 red. Again, just mixing it up, showing you there's different ways to do this. And we'll put 16 black on here, right? Well, how many 0 pairs do I have? Remember, what's a 0 pair? 1 red chip, 1 black chip. So how many 0 pairs do I have? 6, right? So that leaves me with, there's 6 there, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay? All right, moving on, part D. So it says for parts 1 and 3, decide whether the expressions are equal, and then explain how we can predict if it's 0 positive or negative. Well, again, here we have negative 4 plus, and then you're adding a positive 6 to negative 4. So what does that give us as an answer? When I add a 6, a positive 6 to a negative 4? 2, right? What happens when I add a negative 4 to a positive 6? Same number, right? All we did is basically took these two numbers and flip-flopped them, right? What about the other one? If I take negative 3 plus negative 5, negative 8, what if I change the order? Yeah, the same thing, right? So these are equal. So the expressions are equal. Notice how we didn't change the numbers, right? Because 6 is further away from 0 than negative 4, in both problems, right, it was positive. right? Remember we had a positive and a negative there, right? That greater absolute value. Okay. And then here we use the same numbers. So all we did again was flip flop, and the answer is not going to change. All right. So let me. So again, in the first one, the sum of um, number one is positive because the absolute value of -4 is less than the absolute value of 6. Okay? And since 6 was positive, the answer, both answers, were positive, right? Okay? In the second one, so the sum of number 2, well, that was a negative plus a negative, right? And when you add a negative and a negative, you get a negative. So why have we been doing all this? Well, it says the property of rational numbers that you observed in these pairs of problems is called the commutative property of addition. Okay? So let me move this up just so you can write it. But the commutative property of addition, okay, I'm going to kind of give you a little definition here. It says when adding the order of the addends doesn't matter. And what that means is if I take two numbers like a plus b, it equals if I just flip it to b plus a. Right? A and b are just two different numbers. So for example, if I took 1 plus 2 is the same thing as saying 2 plus 1, right? Does that make sense? Right? That's the same thing, right? They both equal what? They both equal what? 3. All right? Or, if you want another example, what if I did negative 8 plus 2 is the same thing as saying 2 plus negative 8, right? To do our little rule, negative 8 is further away from 0 than 2 is. So our answer would be negative, and the answer here would be what? Negative 8 plus 2. Negative 6. But it's the same answer on both sides, right? So the commutative property says I can change it, and as long as the signs stay the same, right, the answer is the same. Okay? All right, so in part E, I want to kind of practice it with you, but I don't want you to write a story problem. All right? So if I take 50 and add a negative 50 to it, what do I get? 0, right? So what I want you to do is pretty much show 1, 2, and 3 in part E, because there's one on the back, on a number line. All right? I want you to put it on a number line. All right? Because these numbers are too big to do with chips. All right? So show me on a number line. We'll give you guys about 5 minutes to do this, and we'll come back together and see how you did. Okay? So you're going to fill in those missing blanks to the number sentences, and then show it to me on a number line. All right? Everybody with me? I'm going to pause it right now. All right, so again, if I show this on a number line, right, the first number is kind of where we start, right? So we started at 50, right? This number here is going to be where we move to, and then obviously this number is where we end. So if I go by tens, right, I know that's minus 10. There's another minus 10, so I'm at 20 now, right? It's minus 40. And then, so there's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So there's your minus 50. And then our answer being 0. What was your answer for the fill-in spot for number 2? Negative 15 plus some number gives you 25. Aren't you? 40, right. Because again, if I show this on a number line, right, where's our starting point? Negative 15. So if I go up to negative 10, I just increased what? 5. Then if I go to 0, I'm increasing by 10. Another 10 is, there's another 10. I'm at 20 now, there's another 10. So what is that? 10, 20, 35. I got to get to 25, right? Well, 25 is an increase of another 5. So when I add all these up together, I get 40. All right, what about the one in the back here? Negative 300 plus 250 is what? Aiden, not 50. What's the bigger absolute value? Right, negative 50. So again, we start at negative 300, right? So I think I went up by 50s. So if we're adding, right, there's a plus 50. There's 200. There's another plus 50. So that adds us 100, right? There's another plus 50. There's another plus 50. So that's 200. So we just got to add one more 50, right? Which is right there. And that puts us at negative 50. All right, we will finish this up on Monday. Okay?